Okay, there we go. Hi, everybody. My name is Caitlin O'Brien. I'm the events coordinator at Square Books in Oxford, Mississippi. And I'm so glad to be hosting this event for Atticus Lish and Elliot Ackerman in celebration of Atticus's newest novel, The War for Gloria. Before we dive into that, I did want to do a little bit of Square Books housekeeping, tell you all about some upcoming events. I'll try to be quick so we can get to the main event. So for locals in North Mississippi, next Thursday, September 16th at 6 p.m., we will be putting on Thacker Mountain Radio. It's going to be live at the Old Armory Pavilion. So that's outdoors. Bring a chair, a friend, and a mask. We'll bring the books. Our featured author for next week is Mary Catherine Backstrom for her memoir, Holy Hot Mess. It's heartbreaking and hilarious, and ultimately kind of reminds us that it's okay to celebrate exactly where we are, holy, hot mess, and all. You may have seen her on Ellen DeGeneres' talk show. We're really excited to have her. There'll be music by the Yalla Bushwhacker House Band and visiting musicians Michael J. Hughes and Sade Thomas. If you're not ready to come in person, no worries. You can find air times for the show by visiting thackermountain.com. But if you're not interested in radios or memoirs, that's fine too. That same evening, we're proud to partner with the Southern Independent Booksellers Alliance to present a Q&A featuring Margaret Rankle for her latest essay collection, Graceland at Last, Notes on Hope and Heartache in the American South. You may already know and love her from the New York Times opinion section or her earlier book, Late Migrations. We've got signed copies, but go quick. We don't have many left. Again, that is Thursday, September 16th. You can learn more about both of those events on our website. But enough about them. I'd like to tell you a little more about Atticus and Elliot. So Atticus Lish is the author of Preparation for the Next Life, which won the 2015 PEN Faulkner Award for Fiction and the 2016, I'm going to butcher this, Grand Prix de Literature. I'm not even going to try. Literature American. Elliot Ackerman is the author of the novels 2034, a novel of the next world war, Red Dress in Black and White, Waiting for Eden, which he visited Square Books, Dark at the Crossing, and Green on Blue, as well as the memoir, Places and Names, On War, Revolution, and Returning. His books have been nominated for the National Book Award and the Dayton Literary Peace Prize. He is both a former White House fellow and Marine, and has served 5 tours of duty in Iraq and Afghanistan, where he received the Silver Star, the Bronze Star for Valor, and the Purple Heart. Gentlemen, thank you both so much for joining us to talk about The War for Gloria, which I was telling Atticus before we hopped on. I wanted to pull a particularly buzzy and wonderful review quote, but there were frankly too many to choose from. If you're not already aware, the book came out just this Tuesday, so we are so glad to have you for Pub Week. But enough from me. Those of you joining us, please feel free to submit questions in the Q&A, and I'll come back to moderate those. And also thank you to our friends in Washington, D.C. Politics and Prose. We're really glad to be co-hosting this event with you. Love working with our fellow indies and supporting wonderful authors like Atticus and Elliot. All right, I'm getting out of here. Thank you both so much. I'm really looking forward to this talk. Thank y'all.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thank
Kate.
you.
Atticus, I thought before we kicked off, maybe if you had a section that you wanted to read, because the book just came out on Tuesday, and so I imagine most of the folks who are with us haven't seen it yet or read any of it yet, and maybe you could give them a little taste, and then we could start our conversation.
Thank you so much, Elliot. I would love to. Here goes. And before I begin, I would like to thank Square Books. I would like to thank Politics and Prose. And for those who are watching, I appreciate anyone who shows up. And most of all to you, Elliot. It's been a long time since I've seen you, and it's an honor to talk to you.
You too, bud.
So I will read from the very beginning, chapter 1. This chapter is called Woman, Earth, Sun, and Richard Feynman. You never think about nerves and breathing. You take breathing for granted. You take the nerves under your skin or under the skin of another animal for granted. His mother loved him. Gloria said, "You make me laugh." He had a sense of humor about their lives, apparently. She was a single mother, and he helped her collect her library off the streets of Boston and never complained about it. They went through crates of books together and shared what they found. Her boy was never bored, even living in her car. She came from Springfield, which she called her shitty little city. She had come to Boston to go to college. She wanted to stand on the shoulders of Germaine Greer, the author of Sex and Destiny. She gave birth to Corey at Mass General during what should have been her final year of college. She crashed in Cleveland Circle, Jamaica Plain, Mission Hill, just her and her son and her ever-changing roommates. For a time, they stayed at a triple-decker house in Dorchester, and he went to a school where a good half the other kids were from the Cape Verde Islands. Corey showed his mom the islands on the map, Boa Vista and Santiago off the coast of Senegal, telling her that he'd be sailing here someday when he grew up and went to sea. He had learned about the concept of a vessel from living in his mother's car. He had fastened on the concept early. Maybe it was always in his head, one of the basic concepts he was born with: woman, earth, sun, boat. Her full name was Gloria Goltz. In his mind, she was always a bright blonde. He saw her as having a glass jaw that she kept putting up, and it kept getting cracked. But when it came to him, she was stalwart. Once, she took him to a KFC, and the manager didn't want to give her another biscuit with her order, but she demanded it because Corey loved biscuits. He had read that sailors ate hardtack and salt pork, and the manager, with his thin arms and striped shirt, relented. "Mom, you're always giving me things. You never ask for anything." Gloria and Corey cut the biscuits on their brown plastic tray and had them with butter and honey. "Will you mind it when I become a sailor?" "Oh no, but I want you to be a smart sailor. I don't want you to be dumb." "But will you mind it when I have to leave home?" "I'll have to accept it. I'll come back and visit. Voyages usually take about 3 years. Whaling voyages can take 7. There was a pattern between them of her getting blue and of him helping her. She got blue because of herself. She had not fulfilled the ambition she'd had at 17, smoking a cigarette in front of her concrete dorm building at Lesley College, in the shadow of Harvard, in the literal shadow of its tombstone-shaped, ivy-covered law library, to think and write and shock the world, to condemn it, to synthesize all the available evidence, art, history, movies, negative messages and images in the media, her upbringing, her body in the mirror, her own thoughts, even the smallest things down to the cigarette in her mouth, into a single scream of rage against the patriarchy. Instead, she'd been a waitress, a barmaid taking bottles off a counter after the bar was closed and the band was unplugging its amps, and it was too late to do anything but sleep the next day away. And this had gone on for years, years of telling herself that she was finding her voice, that she was getting ready, years of reading, not writing, of groggy afternoons, a feminist book in her hands on the tea, Sex and Destiny, Doc Martens on her feet, reading at the Oban Pan, jumping up from her wire chair and standing on the red leather toes of her boots to hug the street musicians who drifted in with the pigeons, carrying guitars, wearing bowler hats and German army trench coats, the wet stink of the bathroom around the corner, and the weird men playing chess all day, the hobos from Seattle, skinheads in suspenders saluting in the street, a dyed mohawk the size of a circular saw blade from a lumber mill atop a gaunt, bald head, kids from the wealthy towns of Concord and Lexington exploring new identities as bitter waifs, at night, a wolf pack of multiracial youths from Dorchester, one a white boy wearing a shirt saying that funky Cypress Hill shit, there to sell drugs. her skinny legs. She had dropped out of school. She had hung out in the pit at Harvard Square, sitting cross-legged in striped tights on the granite wall, her eyes mascaraed, her mouth painted black, debating with her fellow anarchists, giving the finger to the square, the bank, the bricks, the coup, the clock, the privilege and hypocrisy. The scream of rage was at herself. So sometimes as the years passed, she'd look at herself and the weight of the time and the evidence of who she was would hit her, and she'd get high and ask, will it ever be okay? And for some reason, her son would tell her, hey, Mom, don't be sad. You're great. You're greater than you know.
Alex, I was really just so excited to get this book because I remember you talking about it very briefly. And for those of you who don't know, Atticus and I are friends and have been for a number of years. And I remember you first sort of telling me about this book. I don't know if you recall when we were having, I think, Mexican food in Soho probably 4 years ago. And I feel like I just got sort of the very tip of the iceberg about what it was even about. I was wondering if you would just talk a little bit about kind of where this book came from and the process of writing it, because I know, and you've talked about this in interviews, that this book was a heavy lift for you. I mean, it's a real achievement, but I know this one has been a wrestling match for you. So I wonder if you could talk about that a little bit.
Thank you. Yes, and I do remember our meeting. I remember that I asked you what for me was the central question that I was trying to work out. And I thought, I mean, there's a reason I would have asked you, of course, as people will understand. For years, I better back up and say that in case anyone hasn't heard yet, my mother actually is sort of the subject of the book, my actual mother. And my actual mother died of Lou Gehrig's disease. And for years, I was troubled by sort of a conundrum. I didn't understand how I could reconcile two things. I would imagine that I would do anything to protect my mom. And then I would have to see that my willpower was very limited by something as simple as running on a treadmill. I could exhaust myself in a couple of minutes. And as anybody knows who tries to run hard, within just a couple of seconds, you can start to rationalize quitting. And for a long time, I thought, how are these things possible to square up together? And it may seem like an odd thing to get hung up on, but it really did bother me for, I would say, something like 25 years. And I think it motivated me. I was briefly in the Marine Corps. I had a very different kind of career from you, as you know, and anyone out there should know that Elliot Ackerman is Elliot Ackerman, and what Atticus or Lish was doing in the Marines was picking up cigarette butts during the around the barracks. That's pretty much what I did as an 0311.
I did that too, by the way, but go ahead.
All right. Okay. You are gracious. But anyway, so anybody who goes through boot camp, I mean, that's something we, I guess, have in common. But anyone who goes through boot camp starts wondering how long they can last. And this became an obsession for me after the Marines. And eventually I thought it shouldn't just be a physical obsession. I should somehow deal with it by writing the book. So you asked about the genesis of the book. After I got done with my first novel, I sat and asked myself what was close to the bone for me. This was it, the story of my mother's death and my questions about my own moral fiber. And that's what led me to write the book.
And that really, I mean, it really comes through. So, I guess I would say the central protagonist of the book, obviously, is Corey Goltz, who is 15 years old. And when we meet him, he, is just starting to care for his mother as she begins her sickness. And then the thing that I really enjoyed, and one of the things I really enjoyed, but I found exceptional in this book, is the way you write about physicality. I feel like people don't write about it as much in contemporary fiction, and it's tough to write about it well. And specifically, you write about things like manual labor in a very compelling way, and MMA fighting and training in a very compelling way. And obviously, as you alluded, like there is that metaphor in the book of what it means to physically push yourself. And I think it seems to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, was that like a very intentional setup that Corey, his sort of immersion into that physical world as his mother is kind of losing her ability to participate in the physical world?
I can put it this way. After I got out of the Marines, I didn't know you yet, but I knew a corporal and a senior drill instructor, and I had them in my head for years, and I couldn't go out and run without hearing them in my head saying, "Hurry up, Lish." So then I went and started doing some of the martial arts stuff. I followed that all the way out to California, where I'm living now. I began by going to a Brazilian jiu-jitsu school run by the Machados, right next door to the Gracies in Torrance. People will have heard, probably everybody's heard of the Gracies. The Machados are a big name in jiu-jitsu too at that time. And I was hooked up with them by a guy I want to give a shout out to, Bobby Giordano of Belmont, who ran the first martial arts gym I ever went to. Thank you, Bobby. Anyway, there came a time in my early 30s when I went back east. I wanted to complete school, and I went back to Massachusetts, where I had been when all the original events were taking place. And I'd been away from my college for 10 years, and they don't let you back after 10 years. So I was at the last minute to get myself back in. And I had to write an essay to get myself admitted. And when I wrote the essay, I don't know what exact logical connections I made, but I made a psychological connection, which was my mother's illness and this mixed martial arts stuff, this fighting stuff. Because of course they were asking me, what I've been doing in the meantime, and what a college application essay is like. You sort of say how fascinating what have I been up to? So that's what I was doing. But these two things went together. Now, I don't know exactly why. I mean, they seem to obviously fit. The genesis was right there during my mom's illness. I mean, it was in my heart. I don't know how to explain it exactly, but I knew that the fighting and the struggling and the physicality, and I think I can recall what I wrote in that application essay. I said the image of somebody scratching to breathe, which was how I imagined somebody getting choked on the mat, but also my mom, who died of respiratory failure. Those things just went together. So there's the connection, and that's the seed that both of these things sprang from.
So interesting, just as you're sort of speaking, and I know we've talked about this a little bit, but do you feel, because I know that, your training and the martial arts that you've always done and that you write about in the book is obviously, it's a big part of your life. And I know you know this, my brother is a very gifted mathematician and is also a wrestler.
Yes.
Wrestler. And then I know people will sometimes ask me in my own writing, or, and I know this in my own process, like, with incredible consistency, the place where I have intellectual breakthroughs is always when I'm, running or contorting myself or doing something physical. It's when I kind of will very frequently have these moments of clarity. I'm just interested in your own life. Do you feel like the physical work you do and struggle kind of goes hand in hand with the intellectual work and the writing that you do?
Yes, I do. I think I got a pretty nuts and bolts answer for that, or a pretty unexciting answer to an excellent question. For me, I think it just gets blood to my brain. I mean, a lot of times when I sit, I feel like I'm kind of getting stagnant. And then if I get up and go even for just a walk, because by the way, martial arts is really not such a big part of my life anymore. I don't really do it so much. I'm not that committed anymore. I think I sort of digested it with this book and have really gone on to maybe just knitting perhaps, or I don't know what'll be next for me. Maybe fishing. But anyway, I think taking a walk just gets blood to my brain, and then I do think things. So I wonder if you think with your whole body. Maybe that's it.
Yeah. But so we kind of, the stakes are set early in the novel. It's Corey and Gloria, and I felt like their relationships at the core, obviously, but then kind of into the struggle comes Leonard. And I wonder if you could talk a little bit about him as a character.
Gladly. Well, I love Leonard as a character, maybe not so much as a human being, but he's well, gee, what the heck can I say about him? Can you narrow the question a tiny bit for me, just so I don't?
Sure. Or just sort of, he is obviously, he's Corey's father, and so Corey is, as much as he's wrestling with the reality of Gloria's disease, he's also wrestling with his relationship with Leonard. And so I just, I'm kind of curious as to how you built him out as a character. What role he plays in the narrative, and why you have Corey kind of ricocheting off of Leonard. Like, you see a different side of Corey with Leonard, and with the confrontations that he has with Leonard. I don't want to spoil too much of the book, but there's a number of very acute scenes between Corey and Leonard.
Right. Yes. Well, I think that Leonard is I would describe him as like a vampire. I think he draws energy from other people. He kind of sucks them dry and uses them, and then leaves a husk behind. And I think that I imagined him doing that with Gloria. I imagined him doing that with anyone who gets into his orbit. And so, okay, so when he meets Corey, they of course know each other, but they haven't really spent much time together. And so after the book is set up, and we know that Gloria has gotten sick and Leonard re-enters the picture, Corey's in his teens. He would love a father figure. He would love a father. He would love a father to help him and to help his mom. So Corey's looking for something. He's really looking for two things, I would say. On the one hand, he wants to see his mother be defended and for the household to run. And on the other hand, he probably wants the usual things that a son might hope for from a father, which would be sort of benign guidance in how to be a man. And that's, of course, not what Leonard's going to do. Leonard has a different agenda. I think we can sense that Leonard is, first of all, he wants to make sure that he maintains his status above Corey. He doesn't want to let Corey get big. He wants to keep himself big and Corey small. That may be at the core of it. But I think there's another thing too. Leonard doesn't want anyone to interfere with his relationship with Gloria. In other words, imagine a lion eating the body of its prey. You come along and say, hey, wait a minute, don't tear at the innocent flesh of that impala. The lion gets mad at you. That's the relationship between Leonard and Corey. Corey is essentially going to say to Leonard, hey, don't treat my mom like that. And Leonard's going to say, you don't tell me how to treat your mom.
Right. And Leonard is, I thought it was a genius, I don't think I'm giving anything away here, but it's revealed eventually that he's a rent-a-cop.
Yeah, that's right.
I think, I don't know if you intended to sort of be a metaphor, but so much of him is not what it seems. The deeper that the more and more that you get in the book. I mean, it's like an onion. It keeps, he keeps unpeeling. in a really interesting and dynamic way.
Well, if I could just interject, yes, I think that Leonard surrounds himself with illusion because quite probably he doesn't feel very good about what's at the core.
Yeah.
What's at the core of the onion.
Yeah. Before we get back to the characters too, I mean, listen, the novel, it has like a huge sense of place. In books I've written where I'm like aspiring to give them a sense of place, I always try to think of the place as a character in the book. And I'm wondering how you kind of, I mean, this might be a tough question to answer, so I apologize if it's not a very good question, but you do an amazing job kind of rendering Massachusetts and Quincy and all these neighborhoods and Somerville and, how did you, I know you were very familiar with those areas. How did you go about doing it? And how important to you was it that this story was rooted in that place? Because it seemed to me very important.
Well, first of all, thank you for saying that. Second of all, I was living in Brooklyn when I started writing this. And I knew it would be a challenge to render Massachusetts because it wasn't right outside my window. So I took the bus, they have a bunch of buses that go from New York to Boston. There's the Bolt bus, this bus, that bus, the Fung Hua bus. I think I took them all. I made a lot of trips up to Boston. And, I'd lived a lot of my life in Massachusetts. My wife is from Massachusetts, so it wasn't my first time up there, of course, but to go deeper and also to refresh my knowledge, that's why I took the constant trips. Then on top of that, I ended up renting an Airbnb, or I actually ended up renting an apartment that belonged to a dentist in the North End, who happened to mention, North End, for those who don't know, is the old Italian neighborhood in Boston. And what I learned from the fellow who owned the place is that the older generation is moving out to the suburbs, which seems to be a pattern that's happened in New York and elsewhere. And the once Italian working class neighborhood is being taken over by young professionals and college kids and like that. Well, however, the character of the neighborhood was changing. I loved living there, and I used it as a base of operations during the summer of 2016, I believe it was, and so that was one way that I kept my boots on the ground in Boston. But there were other trips, and then finally, towards the end of this process, which lasted until 2021, I went to a moving company. During this would be the summer and fall of 2020. The moving company is called Viking. It's run by my friend Paul Webster, who was good enough to hire me back and to give me a job. And I stayed in the warehouse free of charge, a very comfortable place to stay. I had access to a kitchen and all kinds of amenities. And, truckers would come in and call me the warehouse cat. And speaking of cats, and so I used that as a base of ops to rewrite the last third of the book during the fall of 2020.
Wow. And I was interested to see in the Times. I thought it was very fitting that they gave your novel to Andre Dubus III to review. He gave it a stellar review. Did you ever read Townie when you were?
I did. It's so crazy because now I tend to, I sort of live under, I'm a little bit out of the loop. I kind of live under, I mean, I don't live under a rock, but let's just say I live under a rock. I don't know a lot of things. And I didn't know who Andre Dubus was. And one day I couldn't even tell you, let's say again, 2015, 16, I was wandering around in a neighborhood of Brooklyn, and I went to the library. I usually stop at the public libraries, and I browsed, and I came across this book, Townie, and I sat down and I took it out. I read it immediately. That's how I knew who this man was. And, I think what I took from the book, first of all, it's a powerful book. And what I took from it was, this is sort of a sign from the heavens. I don't know, you're writing about the right subject or something, but I also said, and this is a compliment to it, don't let yourself be influenced by it, right?
Yeah.
So I put it back like kryptonite, because a good book can influence you. And I put it back. I said, don't let yourself think about it. And then to have the book come out and to now be reconnected in this way with Andre Dubusse the third is, it's very strange. It's like you wrote a letter in a bottle and a letter came back to you. It's an odd experience, and I feel very lucky.
Yeah, he's a great writer. I was actually lucky enough when I was 18 years old and landed at Tufts University. He was my freshman composition professor before he'd published all of his big books. And he was doing carpentry jobs on the side and would come in exhausted to class every day and teach, all this idiot 18-year-olds how to write, 3-page essays. But he's a great and beautiful writer. I have one other question for you, specific to kind of the setting. Was like, the story's great and it's really timeless. And you set it in the Obama years. Was that intentional? There's a part of me, like, I feel like it could have been in the 90s or the 80s, or it felt to me like it was intentional. So I'm wondering if that was the case, if you like kind of pushed it forward.
Well, I don't know exactly why it came out that way. Probably because I don't know what years we were in when I was writing it. Who's in charge when I was during 2000? I wrote it between 2014 and 2021. I know Trump was in there. I heard that. I heard somebody mention that Trump was president.
Mm-hmm.
I heard that. But Obama was president before Trump, obviously. I'm not completely out of it. I know that. So I think I just put Obama because Obama was president when I began writing the book.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you feel like the book is a love story?
Well, I hope not, because you don't want because then it would be Psycho. It would be Norman.
No, I don't mean romantic necessarily. I'm just,
Yeah. Yeah, I know what you mean. Okay, sure. Well, you know what it is? I would say it's a memorial. It's me pouring one out for my mother.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One of the things I found really moving in the story, because like when I was reading, I was thinking about this, and take this right away. There were sort of moments in it where like it almost felt like in that story, The Curious Case of Benjamin Button, where there's he's old and becoming young, and she's young and becoming old, and they know they love each other, and they only have this one sort of moment where their vulnerability overlaps exactly. There's this one brief moment where they're the same age. And so much of this book, I kept thinking about that, because I'm like you said, yes, very much comes across as you pouring one out for your mother, but there's this sort of moment where Corey, is becoming stronger, and he's taking on more and more. And to use your metaphor, he's figuring out how hard he can run on the treadmill and finding like there's more, and he can go harder while he's watching his mother be able to do less and less. But there's sort of these like great moments of like, there's, of mutual vulnerability where they're just sort of lined up exactly. And in some of those cases, it was, when Leonard is in the picture and he is challenging them, and they're kind of having to come together to, keep their house in order. So anyway, I just want to compliment you. I found it really, really moving in that way.
Thank you very much for the compliment. And I thought while you were giving me that compliment, I said, there's a novelist talking, because of the way you've imagined that.
Yeah, well, you too, buddy. I want to talk about some of the other characters. I thought, like, can you talk about Adrian's role in the book a little bit? Because I thought he's fascinating. I mean, he's a character who is a student at MIT. He is kind of a tough guy, and he's just this really interesting and unexpected, like, I almost read him almost like a kind of weird doppelganger for Corey. And I'm just sort of, obviously some of this like kind of hews to your own experience and narrative, but where does Adrian come from? Like kind of how did he fit into the book? Where did he show up as you were telling the story?
That's a pretty good way to put it. He's like a brother of Corey's in a way. He's the person that Corey admires before Corey gets before Corey goes through the book. He's someone I would have admired before I got a little bit older, before my mother died. You see, I think that when I was early in adolescence, Adrian sums up the kinds of things that maybe a lot of young men admire, which is muscles, smarts, let's call it power. You could even add in money, although Adrian's not really about money. But as you get older, you realize having strength of various kinds is an amoral quality. It's like having a tool. You can use it for something good or bad, and eventually you want to use it for something that isn't destructive. So, but Adrian's fascinating because of his quirky intellect. He because of his interest in science, and then his radical application of science to his life and to life and to his own self-development. I do think that still makes him interesting to me.
Yeah. Let's talk about science, because science takes a big role in this. I mean, all the characters sort of go, whether it's Corey kind of going deep on his mother's illness, or Adrian being at MIT, or the fact that Leonard is sort of lurking in the hall through the halls of MIT, as you describe him, sort of like a Goodwill, character from Good Will Hunting. I know why, but can you tell us who haven't read the book why it was so important to you to have that golden thread throughout the novel, where you have so many of the characters like talking about science and mathematics, and sort of how those weave into like then the very human story we're seeing play out with Gloria's disease?
Thank you. Yes, I think as you ask me the question, what jumps to my mind is that science is the opposite of morality. Science is the cold, rational mind. It's the will to power. If I can use my intellect to figure out how to split the atom, I can make, I can lay mushroom clouds. But for me, what the book really is a moral quest. So science is the thing that he has to live beyond, to jettison. After all, he doesn't want to go to college. He chooses something else. I think this may reflect my own state of mind as I arrive at this stage in life, which is that I really don't think that I know very much. When I was younger, and I went to all the fancy schools, I actually thought I knew things. The older I get, the more ignorant I do feel. And if I can hope for anything, it isn't knowledge of a scientific kind. It would be by hook or by crook to maybe hang on to a tiny seed of wisdom so that I don't make hash of life. I suppose that's my perspective coming through.
Well, it's interesting to hear you say that, because it's kind of Gloria's perspective too, right? It's almost like she's the embodiment of, Socrates' great wisdom, which is, I know that I am wise because I know that I know nothing. It's almost like, just hearing you say that, it reminds me of Gloria's arc, because we see her kind of, as she becomes older and weaker, in some ways becoming more wise and more clear on some of the things that matter to her. Yeah. And it was interesting for me to hear you say that. And I see Caitlin has popped back up on the screen to probably tell us that it's time to take any questions that we might have. So I see you. If participants, please don't be shy. Pop your question into the message thing here. Or is that what you were going to say, Caitlin?
Yeah, sorry, still muted. I know, I'm sorry to interrupt. I just want them to go on and on and on, but we do have some questions, and okay, so I'm just going to do them in order, but yes, now is the time. We're may you forever keep your peace. But okay, so Mark would like to know, or he starts with a compliment, a well-deserved one. He says, you write better about what it actually feels like to train for a fight, the exhilaration and the boredom, the way it becomes workmanlike and holy than anyone I've read. Were you writing back when you were training, or at least thinking about writing? He says there's such an immediacy to the scenes in the fight, Jim.
Well, thank you. The fight training stuff, I had a vivid refresher course probably around 2009, really before I wrote this book. I went to a gym on Steinway Avenue in Astoria, Queens, called Rhino. The gym didn't last very long. It may have relocated, but we had very good, or I participated in very good sparring sessions. And these always followed a very solid conditioning course. The fellow who trained us was very big on conditioning, and we carried people piggyback, and I got very tired out. And so that was fresh in my mind when it came time to write to write Gloria, and I was able to use it. So an immediate memory can help a lot.
Thank you. Okay, we've got another question. They say, for Atticus, can you talk about living under a rock in this day and age and how that relates to writing in the pure way that you do? That makes sense?
Yeah, I got it. Okay, living under a rock. What I did, this is because I was having trouble writing the book. So I was struggling, and so I began to cut myself off from friends and family, and really that's how I wound up not really knowing what was going on. There may be something about me that I'm sort of the last to know a lot of stuff. I mean, I remember that from elementary school. The other kids would know what our homework was, and sometimes I wouldn't know until the next day when it was due. That happened a little, but really for writing the book, I deliberately shut other things out. That was out of anxiety, out of stress, out of a desire not to let anything interfere. I do think there's a metaphor for this. It may not be a welcome metaphor, but I will share it. I think there may be something similar to how when a pregnancy is going on, it is said that there is a message that the mother has here that she hears in her mind to keep herself sacred and sacrosanct and not interfered with. Maybe something similar is going on. For me.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. And I mean, I hate that you have to totally disrupt your life to bring a book like this into the world. But I mean, I don't know if it's like a one for one, but you can, when you're reading it, you get swept in, and it is its own whole thing. And so I wonder if maybe there's a little translation in that, if that makes any sense. That same kind of, I don't know, it just sucks you right in the same way that maybe you had to kind of wall things out to bring it to the surface. But enough for me. We've got another question. Nicholas says, you mentioned your military backgrounds, and how do you think your upbringing influenced your decision to join the military, assuming that it did to some extent? And if you don't mind, I'd love to hear from both of y'all.
Elliot, would you like to go first?
You go first, Atticus.
Sure. My decision to join the military was related to my upbringing in the following way. I was raised very sheltered. I was a wealthy kid. I lived on the Upper East Side of Manhattan. I think I was probably pampered by the standards of the already pampered people that I went to school with, who were my peers. And that may have something to do with the fact that my parents were on the older side, and I became a pet project of theirs, and they kind of kept me indoors a lot. So when I finally got out of the house when I was a little bit older, I wanted to build myself up and learn how to take on the world. But there was one specific thing that sent me to the military, and that was a book by Richard Marcinko, the Navy SEAL, Rogue Warrior. Probably caused a lot of people to join the military back in the early 90s. That book got to me. I thought, wow, that's a life of adventure. Sign me up.
Yeah, I would just say briefly, kind of some of the things that Atticus talked about probably sent me into the military, which is it's a very objective place in so much as, you know, you either get the mission done or you don't get the mission done. You either, you know, run however far you've got to run in the allotted amount of time, or you don't. And it's a place where everybody's sort of level and everyone's the same. And I think that there are many things that drew me there, but I think that kind of the objectivity of it, the way you just get stripped down, I think was very appealing to me too.
Thank you both. Do we have any more questions? Now's the time. Oh, they say fascinating. Thanks so much, Nicholas. I agree. Thank you both so much. So this isn't really a question, but I do just want to say, like, as a bookseller, The War for Gloria is such a gift because there's kind of something for everybody. You know, it's a Bildungsroman, it's grit lit, it can transport you. Like, if you've never been to Boston or the Boston area, you will have been after reading this, or, you know, and it's cathartic. And anyway, you're making my job really easy, and I thank you for that, because it's easy to help this book find readers, because I don't know, there's a lot going on, but it never really feels that way when you're reading it, which is you know, not common. So congratulations.
Yeah, it's a great book, Atticus. I was very excited to get it, and you have outdone yourself. So so thank you for giving us this book.
Yeah, it's just
Thank you both for saying that. I really feel overwhelmed. Thank you very much. Thank you.
I mean it. And so if we don't have any more questions, we should perhaps wrap it up for the evening, as sad as I am to do so. So we have signed bookplate editions. Well, we will early next week. The bookplates are on their way. That is true for both Square Books and Politics in Prose. We're happy to share. So, you know, pick an indie, it's all good. And I would like to remind folks that author events, virtual, in person, hybrid, or whatever comes next, they're not possible without your support. So if you're not already shopping indie, now's the time. Start with The War for Gloria. And looks like we have one more question. And an anonymous attendee says it is a brilliant novel. I agree, anonymous. And perhaps that's the right note to end on. So I put the link in to purchase the book a couple of times, so please do so. And thank you both for spending your evening, or I guess Atticus, your afternoon with us, late afternoon. And thanks to all of our attendees for your wonderful questions and for your presence. I don't know, it's such a treat to all be together, even though we are not together. Still kind of a trip. So shall we wrap it up? Do y'all like to say goodbye? Or there's never an easy way to end these. I still haven't gotten the knack for it.
Well, I have to thank you both. Elliot, it's so good to see you after so long. I want to catch up with you a little more. I'm going to contact you after this. And I would like to thank you. I would like to, Caitlin, I want to thank Square Books and Politics in Prose. I'm very happy. This has been a great evening. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you both. Okay, we'll wrap it up. All right, thanks all. Take care. Hope to do it again soon. Okay, see ya.